All right, welcome everyone. Today we're going to pull back the curtain on Clause 4 of the AS9100D Aerospace Standard. Now, I know what you might be thinking, another clause, more rules. But stick with me, because this isn't about compliance checklists. This is about the very DNA, the strategic foundation that makes a quality management system truly world-class.
So let's just ask the big question right up front. What really is the DNA of an elite aerospace company? You know, what's that secret ingredient that separates the absolute best from, well, everyone else? It turns out the answer starts right here, in the very first strategic clause of AS9100D. This is what sets the stage for everything: quality, performance, the whole shebang.
Okay, so the fancy term for this whole concept is the context of the organization. But really, just think of it like this. Before you build a house, you have to survey the land, right? You need to know about the soil, the weather, the neighbors. This is exactly that, but for your business. It's the starting point where you look around, both inside your own walls and out at the wider world, to figure out exactly where you stand. And trust me, this context is going to shape every single decision you make in your quality management system or your QMS. So here's what we're going to cover. We'll start with the foundation of quality, then jump into your organization's 360-degree view. After that, we'll untangle the stakeholder web, define your quality scope, and finally, build your process engine. And to make all this super practical, we're going to follow a case study of a fictional company called Advanced Aero Parts Manufacturing, or AAM for short.
All right, let's dive into our first section, the foundation of quality. The big idea here is making a mental shift. We're moving away from seeing quality as just compliance, just checking boxes to pass an audit. Instead, we're looking at it as a real strategy. Clause 4 isn't some annoying hurdle. It's literally the blueprint for building a tougher, more competitive company.
And our guide on this journey is going to be AAM. Imagine them as a top-tier, high-precision manufacturer making those absolutely critical parts for aircraft. By watching how they tackle these requirements, we're going to see how all these, abstract ideas turn into real, concrete actions you can actually use.
Okay, on to Section 2, your organization's 360-degree view, which is all about Clause 4.1, understanding context. I love this analogy. Think of it as your company's own high-tech situational awareness radar. It's constantly scanning 360 degrees, looking inward at how you're performing, outward at what the market is doing, and even forward, trying to see what's coming over the horizon.
And here's the wording straight from the horse's mouth, the AS9100D standard itself. It says the organization shall, and in standard speak, shall means you have to, determine external and internal issues. But look closely at that last part. They've added a new requirement. You also shall determine if climate change is a relevant issue. And folks, that is a huge update and a real game changer.
So what does that actually mean? How do we break it down? Well, it's pretty simple, really. On one side, you've got your internal issues. This is the stuff happening inside your company that you can, for the most part, control. We're talking about your culture, your people's expertise, how well you're performing. Then, on the other side, you've got the external issues. This is the stuff happening outside your company. New laws, crazy tech advancements, what your competitors are up to, market trends. You can't control this stuff, not a chance. But you better believe you have to react to it.
And here's a perfect example of how our case study company, AAM, puts this into action. They use a tool you've probably seen before, a classic SWOT analysis, for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So they look at their strengths, like having that AS9100D certification. That's a huge plus. But they're also honest about their weaknesses, like depending too much on imported alloys. That's not just a weakness, it's a major threat if that supply chain gets disrupted.
But here's the critical part. Just knowing you have a weakness is, well, it's useless, right? So AMM doesn't stop there. They take that weakness, that dependency on foreign materials, and they build a real tangible action plan around it. Look at this. They assign it directly to the supply chain management team and give them a clear, measurable goal. Get 40% of our materials from local sources. That is how you turn a simple analysis into powerful action. Okay, so what about that new climate change rule we talked about? How does AM handle that? Well, they tackle it head-on by creating a specific risk register. They think about the external risks, right? Like, what if extreme weather messes up our supply chain? The plan? Find backup suppliers in safer locations. Then they look internally. Their CNC machines use a ton of energy. That's a cost and a carbon footprint issue. The plan? Upgrade the machines and monitor usage. See, this is what proactive risk management looks like.
All right, so once you've got that 360-degree view of your world, the standard says, okay, now you need to figure out who actually cares about what you do. This is Clause 4.2, and it's all about understanding your stakeholder web. And it really is a web because no company, especially in aerospace, is an island. You're part of this huge, complex ecosystem of what the standard calls interested parties.
And when we say ecosystem, we mean it's broad. For a company like AM, it goes way beyond just their customers. Of course, you have the big OEMs and Tier 1s, but you also have the regulatory giants like the FAA and EASA. You've got your own suppliers, your employees, your shareholders, and even the local community and the environment. Every single one of these groups has a vested interest in how AM does business.
So what's the next step? AM doesn't just list them out. They map what each of these parties actually wants or expects from them. And then, and this is the really smart part, they figure out how big of an impact that need has on their QMS. So yeah, customers wanting zero-defect parts, that's a high impact, but regulatory bodies demanding product safety and airworthiness, that gets rated as very high. Doing this lets them prioritize and focus their energy and resources on what truly matters the most. See how this all flows together? Once you know your context and you know who your stakeholders are, the next logical step is Clause 4.3. This is where you draw a line in the sand and define the official boundaries of your quality management system. We call this defining your scope.
And this scope statement can't be some fluffy, vague paragraph. It has to be razor sharp. Take a look at AAMs. It's crystal clear. It tells you exactly what they do: design, development, precision machining, and what they make: mission-critical aerospace components. There is absolutely no room for misunderstanding.
And again, this scope doesn't just come from nowhere. You don't just make it up. It's the direct result of all the homework we've already done. It's built from those internal and external issues from Clause 4.1. It considers the needs of your stakeholders from 4.2. And of course, it has to reflect what you actually make or do. See? It's all connected in one logical flow.
Which brings us to the grand finale of Clause 4. This is the final piece of the foundation. Clause 4.4, building your process engine. I like to think of it this way. If everything we've done so far was about creating the blueprint, this is where we actually build the high-performance engine that makes the whole system go. This is your company's operational playbook. So from a bird's eye view, what AM does is map out its entire value stream. Think of it as the journey a product takes through their company. It starts with a customer requirement, goes through design, planning, procurement, all the way to production, inspection, delivery, and even support after the sale. It's a visual map of how they create and deliver value step by step.
And to make sense of all those steps, AAM cleverly groups them into three main buckets. You've got your leadership processes. Think of these as the captain steering the ship. Then you have the core operational processes. This is the engine room, where the actual product gets built. And finally, the support processes, like HR or IT. They're the crew that makes sure the captain has what they need and the engine room keeps running smoothly. Now, to control all this, the documentation has to be organized. There's a really clear hierarchy. Think of it like a pyramid. At the very top, you have the quality manual. That's your why. It explains the whole purpose. Below that are procedures, which tell you the what, when, and who. Then you get down to the nitty-gritty with work instructions. That's the how. And at the very bottom, you have records and forms. That's your proof that you did everything you said you would. It's a brilliant system for clarity and control.
So let's zoom out and put a bow on this. When you really get Clause 4 right, it's not about compliance anymore. It's so much more than that. It completely transforms your QMS from this boring checklist you have to get through into a genuinely powerful tool. A tool for building a business that's stronger, smarter, and way more resilient to whatever the world throws at it. And honestly, the conclusion from our AAM case study just says it perfectly. A solid foundation in Clause 4 isn't just paperwork. It leads directly to better planning, tighter control over your operations, and maybe the most important thing of all, it fosters a culture where you're always getting better. It really is the launchpad for achieving true excellence. So, that brings us to the final and maybe most important question. And this one is for you to take back to your own team. Take a hard look at your own organization and ask yourself, is our quality system just a chore? Is it just a checklist we have to get through to keep an auditor happy? Or is it a real, tangible, competitive advantage that's actively driving our business forward? The path to answering that question, well, it starts right back at Clause 4. Thanks so much for joining us.